Twitch presents our next big thing. Something long promised, but never delivered. Getting paid for using Twitter. For how many long years have you toiled for free on this god-forsaken site? What a mess. What a shame. What could have been. But now Twitch is here to save the day yet again. You'll finally be getting paid for all your hard work.
I tell you about the time I had my Cuban videographer, he almost beat up. Ladies and gentlemen, I am back. And for those who don't know, I am
that Hotep Jesus dude. That Hotep Jesus dude.
You know, I wouldn't be able to get that soundbite if I paid him. So it's interesting how these things come about and happen in our worlds. Welcome everyone. I have a very interesting conversation for you today with one of our fellow internal Hoteps, good brother, part of our wonderful movement. But first, let me pay the bill. Shout out to Syscoin. Syscoin is the sponsor of my channel for this month and one of the sponsors for HotepCon. Syscoin is now listed on Binance. For all my US Binance users, that means you can now acquire Syscoin easier. So you guys are looking to play your hand at some, roll the dice at some cryptocurrency, check out Syscoin. Syscoin also has just released their NFT marketplace, Luxy. So you guys make sure you check that out. It's be very, very interesting, and I can't wait to meet the Syscoin team on Thursday. Shout out to Men of Order, all things men and masculinity, menoforder.com. Make sure you guys get in tune. Trey, what's up, bro? How are you, man?
Hey man, I'm doing good. How you doing?
Got some flight delays for HotepCon.
Yeah.
I guess it's a pilot shortage of going around the United States or something like that. So, other than that, life is good, man. Life is good. Excited about HotepCon. And meeting the whole team and the crew and everybody that bought a ticket. Really appreciative of them and just can't wait to meet everybody and hang out.
What's up? What's up? Yeah, unfortunately I won't be there. I'm gonna be putting in some work, you know what I'm saying, pay for this baby girl's birthday trip. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Shout out to you and Cassius Cam are gonna miss this year. Cassius Cam is out fighting fires.
Cam put work too.
Yeah, he putting in that work.
Yeah.
In that work. You're taking care of your daughter, so all legitimate reasons to miss HotepCon. Otherwise, you guys would have been suspended. It's like, nah.
Man.
Nah, you guys been down with the movement for a really long time. Show like mad dedication and loyalty. So you guys always have access to me, always have access to my platform. And we have a rather interesting conversation to have today.
Yeah.
This came on the heels of King Randall.
Yes.
Randall, for people who don't know, I interviewed King Randall and his students. I gave my thoughts about his situation. And Trey saw it and reached out to me. For guys that don't know, his link's in the description box below, his website and his Twitter. If you guys want to follow, make sure you guys go follow him. And we'll read super chats at the end. For anybody who'd like to support the channel, super chat or Cash App, $ Hotep Jesus. But he hit me up and said, hey, you know, this is something interesting you said here about lack of media coverage. Because when I saw the school go live, I saw it directly from his Twitter feed or Instagram feed, but I saw it directly from King Randall. So I think I was maybe 2 days after I decided to cover the story, but I planned it for a Friday afternoon. And I think that was 2 days after the school had opened. And I went to go do a little bit of research about the school. And I only saw one article there about the school specifically. Not to say that they don't exist. What I'm saying, what I saw on Google, what I saw on DuckDuckGo. And one of them was from like March or May or something like that. And I was just wondering myself, like, where's Fox News to cover this? Where's all the right wing websites? We know the left isn't going to cover this, right? But where's all the right wing? So you reached out to me and you said, yo, there's a particular thing happened to you in a similar case. And that's where we kind of left off. So let's pick up right there. But before we go into your story, what is up with that? Why is it that this X for Boys school isn't getting the news coverage like it should?
Well, because it's for black boys, first of all. Let's just be honest here.
Okay.
It's because it's black boys. You spoke on the name and how it could be provocative and how that was kind of a good choice, and I thought so too. But that's also a reason why the coverage doesn't come, because it is seen as I feel like the conservative establishment, they have a problem with what could be perceived as militantly black, right? And from the outside looking in, if you don't know how King Randall is, you would automatically think, okay, they're in there training some black men to come out and hate the establishment, so on and so forth. Obviously, if you follow Randall, then you recognize he's not that man. He's really about the mission. And that's another facet of not being seen, is because he's about the mission. They'll let something like that succeed, but they're not going to give you any kind of help with that. If you're that deep into it, if you're going to be this much of a hassle for them, if you're going to get around everything that they put in your way, then it makes most sense that they're not going to give you any coverage, the limited coverage from their, perspective on who you are. I do believe he was getting some Democratic coverage from Roland Martin in negative ways on the way up to this. And he was he was put in the same category as Dr. Umar and the others who haven't necessarily, no shade to them, but who haven't gotten it done yet. And I think that also is, they see from the outside looking in, and it's because it's black boys. Whatever we do, whenever we amass, they're going to be a little bit nervous about that. And when we amass and we're not about tearing down the system, but about using it for cultivating power and, a legacy, that puts them on their heels. That's just what I think.
I have a parallel theory to that.
Okay.
What I believe is happening is that when we deal with the Grift Economy, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
The Grift Economy is full of status. People who want government involvement in their lives. They support it, they go along with it, they're part of it. And because of this alignment, government needs dependency. So any movement which could breed some independency is not going to be favored, because let's be honest, when we turn on the timeline, ain't a whole lot of solution talk going on.
No.
Everybody's running around complaining about the problems. Ain't nobody putting in the work. Right? So that's my parallel theory. I think it's just the fact that they're like, oh, there's no clicks here.
I feel like it's a tornado of all of these things that,
right,
make it perfect for a scenario where you have to actually search the algorithm to find this. If you don't know who this is, You know, my wife, she has a Twitter, but she does not really own that. She likes to use Instagram. And so when I'm talking about this, she didn't even know who he was. And that should have come across her feed on one of the one of the news sites that is on her Instagram feed. So the fact that that's not there, but all of this other, and this is, you would think from a pro-Black perspective from, these news sites that this is good for business. But it's, the ideologies prevent people from seeing past the good. And here we go again, where he's done this. And man, that's breathtaking. Just listening to these boys in the background, that right there is something that I've always wanted to see. I've always wanted to be able to do myself. And he actually did it, and in short order.
Parallel to these ideologies that are combating each other, I also see the ego. I also see selfishness, looking out for self-interest. And me studying this organism we call Homo sapien, I've noticed that everybody operates in self-interest. So if you can play to the people's self-interest, you can do some good in the world. For example, you saw my campaign, Dems Must Pay. Everybody said that conservatives, right-wing people were against reparations. But I understood self-interest.
Yes.
So when I said Dems Must Pay, which is in line with their rhetoric, because they swear the Democrats are the ones that destroyed the Black community. But when I said Dems Must Pay, all of a sudden they said, you know what, I'm in favor of reparations now. You find out they're not exactly against reparations. They just don't want to be responsible for reparations. Again, coming back to people's self-interest, I think that's the first thing we got to understand is that people are going to act in self-interest, even racial groups. And it seems like the only two people that are shunned for having any racial pride is white people and Black people.
You can't say Black power and you can't say white power. Either one of those is going to cause a problem. Either one of those is going to cause. If you come out and you say Asian pride, everyone's going to be like, "That's so beautiful." You know what I'm saying? They're going to put their kimonos on, whatever. You can't say the other things. This is the truth.
You could be Indian, Hawaiian, Ukrainian, no matter what it is, you can be happy to be that. But let you come out and say Black power, and it's like
we're supposed to be the ultimate grudge match. That's what gets.
You know what? This might play into some of the Moors. You know their philosophy. When you start playing color games, calling yourselves Black and calling yourselves white. They don't even
mess around. I already know. I was in the temple when I was locked up. I was in the temple for a minute, and I got beat on the head a lot with that.
I mean, think about it. Black and white scientifically is in juxtaposition to each other.
Yeah.
They automatically polar opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And then they call ourselves Black and white instead of saying, okay, this is an Italian. You know what I'm saying? Or this is a Mississippian. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or a Texan. You know, like we playing Black and white, which is a broad brush to paint all Black people one thing and all white people another thing. And these white people, some of them don't even like, Irish don't like the Italian don't like this guy, and the Scottish don't like. Ask a Scottish nigga when you hear his accent, ask me if he from England, see if he don't cuss you out.
I already know.
So yeah, I think again, coming back to my premise, I just think a lot of it is in self-interest. But anyway, so you had a story where you were doing some great movement. People don't know Trey does great activism in his community, has done great activism in his community. He's a witness, a first-hand witness to what it looks like when Antifa co-ops your protest. So you jam 6 people. If he was there, he could have spotted it out. He could have let you guys know, look, ops is in the building. You see what I'm saying? Because he's seen this before. He's been on the ground. So tell me about the story you have.
Yes. So amongst this time in the protest, one of the things that me and a few brothers were trying to get started was a cultural center there's a few cultural centers out here in Colorado that cater to the LGBTQ community and all of the other cultures, but for the Black gentrified community, there wasn't any of that, obvious, right?
Wait, say that again. Rewind that.
Yeah, so there was a cultural center for the LGBTQ community.
There's a cultural center for the
Yes,
LGBT.
so it's a foundation, but it is considered a cultural center. It's considered, if you're Black, it's considered the place you go if you don't go to any of these other integrated places.
The
I only
rainbow
know
spot.
the rainbow spot. When I
Okay.
got out, I was looking for places to go to, you know, to learn, to be in a good environment, so that I could kind of rectify some of the things that had happened in my own life, right? And so I came across all of these organizations. And so they only had these places that catered to these communities. They gave aid, you know, whether it be housing, food for if they're unhoused, you know what I'm saying? If you're actually working, college services, all of the services you would need, right? They gave all of these to all of these communities in Colorado, but the Black men specifically and Black people coming out of prison and coming out of youth homes didn't have this, right? And so it was our idea. All this money was moving around. If we could somehow inject ourselves into these spaces where this money in the protests, because during the protests, there's a lot of rich white liberals down there looking to, you know, help people, looking to get your movement started. A lot of the things that we did, a lot of our media, things like that, were handled by, you know, white liberals who wanted to do good, right? And so they would put us up in their house, and we'd be able to look at schematics of the road so we could plan our march so that we could avoid it was serious. They were really willing to put money in, which is lends credence to what you're saying. You know, you can't get nothing done with just things. And this is true. This is 100% true. If you want to get something done for Black people, you got to find a group of willing white folks who are willing to help you. And this is the truth.
Well, let me just correct that there. It's not necessarily about finding white folks to help. It's about lowering the resistance to
Right.
other groups of people, right? Because I think that was the thing when I came up in Black consciousness. It seemed like the commonality that would never be a debate was a disdain for white people. These are our sworn enemy and white supremacy, right? Like that was the thing. So when I was going through my whole whatever realization, it was just about lowering that barrier and saying, listen, I am Black. I'm naturally going to do what's best for my people, but I'm willing to work with all people and for all people. Because I can't call myself a good person if I see a little white girl on the street starving and I don't throw her some bread. You see what I'm saying? I can't call myself a good person, and I can't do that. I can't see somebody like that who needs and not give. So it's not really about saying like, hey, let's find white people. I think it's like, let's open the doors to all people, and whoever, because we're doing this based upon personality type and where your mind is at. You see what I'm saying? It's psychological makeup. But that's what I just wanted to clarify that so niggas don't think like, you know what I'm saying?
No. And you're right, because you can't just you can't isolate, and you can't bring them in for the sole purposes of helping. They have to be a part of the movement you're creating in order for it to be organically good, which is why they did so many things to take us down, because we were organically good. We did these things, these very concepts. And so me and these brothers, you know, some of the leaders of our movement, we had made this decision where we want to start a Black center, a cultural center, so that, you know, anyone can show up, anyone can donate, but this is a place for Black commerce in the area that was previously, you know, occupied by all these Black people that have been turned into, you know, the fancy areas of Colorado that have been gentrified. And so we were getting a lot of ears during this time. And really what was happening is that people were holding on to their money until they could put it into who they felt could keep the most traction. And we were the ones who everyone turned against, and they ended up giving traction to a lot of these organizations that crumbled soon after. And they were puppet organizations, you know, they were hyper socialist organizations. and they were against the people. They were against the good of the people. Their idea of the working class was a little bit different than the way they tell people. The working class.
Let's call it what it is. Friends giving friends kickbacks.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so these organizations crumbled, and it was unfortunate. But how that happened was a unique story, because we were using our protests during this time to get the service that we were looking for, to get this money, to get the funding. And everybody thought that, there were models that needed to be followed, get brutalized by the police, and then you'll get traction. But we weren't doing that. What happened?
Again? Get brutalized by the police
And
so you can get traction?
And you get traction.
Wait, this is a tactic.
This is a tactic. So this became a tactic after we were organically brutalized by the police and got organic traction. So,
so they stole your moment where you were an actual victim, and then they tried to use it to make themselves artificial victim.
They tried to recreate our circumstance illegitimately, and they used people who weren't ready. All of us, we were a smaller group of people, and we had enough aid from a lot of rich people who wanted to help, who were just being like, here, we'll give you tents, we'll give you supplies, and all you have to do is just keep doing the good work. And so we were like, perfect, if they're gonna pour this in, we're gonna mold this and create this into something. And so we put up aid tents wherever we marched to, and we gave aid to all the unhoused people, which in Colorado, the main issue outside of racism is unhoused people. It's the homeless population. That population blew up over, from 2010 to now, into something that is closing in on California. They're displacing them. They started, sweeping them and this and that in the third. So we were setting up these tents, and we were giving them actual aid, and we were communicating with the general public who was angry about our presence. We were growing in size, but our size came from the numbers of people who interacted with us and didn't like us being out there. We were changing a lot of minds. And so we set up one night, and the police attacked us. They gave us 48 hours, and then they came back a couple hours later and demolished us.
A couple hours later?
So it was, it was like dusk when they told us we had to leave, and then we bartered for 48 hours, and then that's like 6 hours later, they came out of nowhere. Yeah. It was like a Stormtroopers moment. It was like Star Wars. I got the link for the YouTube because there was a live streamer who followed us all the time, and it was pretty scary. A lot of screams, stuff I wasn't even prepared for. I didn't even think that was going to happen. Not to us here in Colorado, but it did. And so that night we reached out to a lot of media sources, because reporters are on the ground during this time, and reporters can get you connections. And so we were taking interviews with all sorts of people, throughout the protests because of this. But in the beginning, it was us just reaching out to people we knew who were using their media accounts to reach out to other people to get us aid that night. And so that traction turned us into a force in Denver. We were showing up at city council during votes that the public's allowed to go to, and we were teaching people, this is what they're going to vote on that you don't actually know about. These are the things you can do. And so eventually they closed us out, said COVID, you can't come in there, even though it was a big thing. They all went live streaming and everything just to keep us out of there. But we were doing that. And so these other socialist organizations, they decided, we will do this. We're going to take people who are coming here, and we're going to move them right into the police way, right into the barricade. We're going to march right to the danger. And when we get attacked, we're going to spin this for police brutality. And this is not me saying that. This is a white woman who worked for one of these organizations saying this to me on the night that I ended up getting charged with the other leaders for. when we were asking them, why are we doing this? Why are we around a police station? Why are they trying to barricade? And she literally said, well, if they attack us, then we're going to have it on video and we're just going to spin the narrative. And this is what she said to me because she's stupid. And they aggregate around stupid people. And so this is this this is how I was able to find that out. So now I use it as a regular talking point because it's the truth.
So what was the relationship with the media like?
So
because they're interviewing you, did they ever spin any of your stories? I know sometimes the media, they take your words and then...
We were BLM a few times. We were Black Lives Matter a few times. We were Black. So the chapter out here is Black Lives Matter 5280. And that was us several times in a row. Even though the reporter on the ground who would speak to, and I was always the person because I was leading the protest, and they would walk up and I'd be like, this is not a Black Lives Matter protest. This is not for BLM. And I would be real specific because I know the spin. And I wanted our live streamers to show this to the audience, to show people these things. Because all this time, I'm in Hotep Nation. So all of the things I'm learning about diversion and all of these things as the live streams are going, as you're talking about these things, as we're all kind of just shooting the shit about these things, I'm using these tactics to understand and better make us an effective movement. And so the media either lied about us or they were highly intrigued. A lot of times we were BLM, a lot of times we were rioters.
So you tell them, hey, I'm not BLM, and then the journalists turn around and report and say, BLM is out here.
Yes.
Yeah. I see that all the time from right wingers. Like, it'll be a bunch of people protesting, black people protesting, and then the journalists or whatever grifter with a large social media following on Twitter is going to say, they're going to attack them, BLM, every single time. And then they say, well, why do black people support BLM? And it's just like, you could have just labeled a group that was against BLM, full of black people, and labeled them BLM.
That's right.
Niggas don't fuck with BLM. That's
right. And, and I mean, to their credit, they chose a really good name because it's like, when you go out there, it just seems like it's the right thing to say.
Right.
And so when you tell people that the connection between BLM and why they're out there following you is completely different, it's goes right through their brain because the next day they're out there with a cardboard sign that says BLM on it. So they don't understand.
You gotta tell them change the sign, put the sign away.
Yes, sometimes yes. They don't understand, like especially when the media comes out, I would be really diligent about making sure anyone who's got one of these Black Lives Matter signs is not in their direct view because they're going to use that and spin it. And so a few times they did that to us, but a couple times the local media, they would highlight us. And, there's one time they highlighted the group that we had first joined and we were kind of like a core leadership. And they, wanted to see what we believed about the community while we were out here essentially. And that almost got zero traction. They aired it on YouTube. So didn't even go on television. We thought we were going on TV. Yeah. It was on YouTube, on their YouTube link in the description, underneath the description for the news of the day. So, if you're Julian Assange, maybe you can find it. But if you're just a regular dude, you're not going to find it.
This is leftist media.
Yes, this is leftist media. And so, right-wing reporters, they came out a little more towards the end when the things that were happening to me were public, because I was and had always been verbally, very loudly against socialism, against the politics of all of these people who are out here. I said, we have problems here. I was telling people it's not about George Floyd, it's about Elijah McClain and all these others. And it wasn't just me. There were others who were doing that first. And so when these things were made aware to me, I was like, oh, well, then the message has to change. This is about Elijah then. This is about what's happening here in Colorado, right? And so I was learning as everyone else was, but I was learning on a different frequency. And so that allowed for the groups we created to be so effective. They didn't want to work together, but they didn't understand how to speak a message as one. how to say, I want the left foot, I want the right foot, and I want the back. They didn't know how to they didn't know how to say those things, communicate that. And I thought that as a Hotep, that's what I do. You bring people together. And so I was like, this is a movement that we could do some things. And we did a lot in the interim, in that time, because we came together. I brought people together. But then that's when the actual government decided we're going to break this up. And so then that's the second phase. Once, if people
what do you
can't,
mean the government decided it was going to break it up?
FBI, the Phoebes.
What happened?
So they put CI in our group, in our coalition. Yes. They put a whole CI in our coalition. The last time we talked, I told you I had a belief that there was one there, and there was proof was there. Well, after all of the cases,
sure it wasn't Chad?
Yo, Chad was in the building.
Chad was in the building. Oh Lord, they had a chatty. Okay.
So I mean, today I get contacted by by like people who want to do a story about this, who have gotten released reports, and so I get to hear from other people what they were, how they were surveilling us or what they were thinking about us. And so right as the case was dropped, a lot of these things were made public, and so all of those things that I said that I had a suspicion about ended up being a thing. They ended up happening. All of our movement, everything that we created, it was our asking. It was what we were asking for. We were wanting equity-specific things, and that's not how you continue protesting. You ask for equality to continue protesting. And so that's how they started stopping us. They started first at the local level with news. And then when they couldn't get the news to spin your story enough, because the public, they're trying to scare the people from coming out there. But we were interacting with the cars. We were stopping the traffic and talking to the drivers in the vehicles. And we got a couple guns pulled out on us. This is true. You know what I'm saying? Rest in peace, one of our brothers, he got hit by a car once. Dude, came back around and spun the block and hit him. But the people that we galvanized, the majority of the people on the road, the majority of the people who were actually stopping and giving money and getting all these people fed and who represented the hundreds, these were people who we stopped in the road that night and told them, this is why we're out here and this is what we want. These people live down the block. They would take our way specifically to stop in front of us eventually. So these things, they decided, well, we can stop them through people in the crowd. And so that's when you have physical infiltrators who would come in, they would try to steer your message. They would come in, they would try to change your chants, or they would move a section of people to the side and give them their own philosophies on what's happening and try to gather a little movement. And you could see this happening. You could see this physically. Watch this happening. And these obviously aren't normal people. They're not the average citizen. They are someone working for someone else. No individual says, I need to divert this protest for the means of socialism or for the means of destruction so that this protest loses.
It's a concerted effort from the ops, yes.
Come on. Yeah, exactly. That's right. So this is the path that they took for us specifically. In the very end, it was the ops that had to stop us. It was putting charges against the leaders, trying to charge us for marching around a municipal center. And there were people there who were trying to break in, and people who lit municipal center paperwork inside of these office buildings on fire on the courthouse grounds. We saw these people do these things and slip away, in the cover of darkness and disappear completely. And it's on YouTube streams. And directly after that, they charged us for these actions and halted the protest. And then when the protest rebooted, it was led by these socialist organizations. They were all socialist organizations, either for some sort of diversity, some sort of gender specific thing. But obviously the program was nothing equitable for Black people, and barely anything equitable for the unhoused people, because Black people aren't the only unhoused people out there. And that was something that I had to learn, was that I can't go out there and be my hero, Khalid Muhammad. I can't. This is Colorado. This isn't Harlem. So when I went out there, I said, it's not just my people, it's all of our people that are out here on the street. And we have a service that we need to do these people. And so these are the mechanisms they needed to stop that.
Interesting. Wow, it's a lot to unpack there, bro. You got guns pulled on you. You got the media trying to slander you. And then ultimately the thing that took y'all down was basically false flag operations.
Yes. So the false flag showed up, accused me of being the false flag. That's how I lost like a subsection of like fellowship, because they were like, oh, Trey's the ops. They said, why does Trey always show his face? He never wears a mask. Why does he always tell people who he is? Why am I so honest? That's what it was about. Because I never one time about who I was. I was like, my name is Trey. I'm a felon. You know what I'm saying? I got a number out here in Colorado. I refused to wear a mask.
So they tried to divert members away. They got a couple of members away, got probably some of yours questioning, looking at you funny.
Yeah, they took some of them, and then after that, they used some liberal media sources, a group called Wall of Moms. Wall of Moms.
Wall of Moms.
All of Moms, and it was a bunch of moms, and they were led by the supreme of their group, who hated Black men specifically.
It's a Black woman?
This was a white woman.
A white woman that hates Black men?
Yes.
Wow. Oh, God. That sounds like the worst villain from an X-Men movie.
Every Black male leadership she would come after, specifically them. And it was always an accusation that they were the ops.
Okay.
Every single time. And they would say, well, I have sources. My sources say that they're working with the police, or they're working with, because in the very, very beginning of all this, the first major protest out here was led by some Black men who didn't know what they were doing. And they marched with the police a few times. And the optics obviously is not going to be good for business right after.
Walking around with 12 and shit.
It was holding hands with 12 walking. And so, and so it was very easy to scare people into not working with us by just saying, yeah, they're working with the police. I heard they're working with Mayor Hancock, who was Black man. And so they were like, yeah, he's one of his coons. That is essentially what these white people were telling each other on Reddit. Trey's one of his coons, or this man's one of his. And so these things were coupled with the ops, and these people were these people weren't even attached to the ops. They were just organic socialists, organic leaders.
Yeah.
And
but that's worse than the ops.
Yes.
Socialist organizations are worse than like FBI.
Yes, because they go for your reputation. The FBI just want to lock you up or get rid of you.
Right.
The socialists want to tarnish you.
Harass you like they do in Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Make you be whoever, I was right wing, or I was whatever, whatever was hot for the day.
Yeah.
My opinions are Joe Rogan opinions.
Yeah.
That's what they tell me. A whole bunch of stuff, which is like, when you break all of that down, when you unpack all of that, you recognize just so much ignorance in it. That was what they were doing. They were all working together while not working together. They knew that, and this happened because I branched off. When you talk about self-interest, this was my failure in leadership in this, because I showed self-interest to Black people, even though I spoke for everyone, even though I pointed to everyone in the crowd. I never ever once misgendered. We're in Colorado, man. I never once misgendered a person. If they were like, if I'm Susan, you're Susan. I called them Susan, and I didn't falter, not once. I didn't let them see my true beliefs, and if they did, they understood them to a degree that they said, we can be friends, and he can call me this and still disagree with me. I was like that, and so they used that against me because my self-interest started to focus more on just Black people. I was like, at these white people, they were starting to get on my nerves. And I was the thought of working with them to get to the top was nerve-wracking. The thought of not misgendering somebody every day was getting on my nerves because they were always.
These are people a part of your group that were concerned with their genders.
Yeah. So like as our group grew, other people, they started getting more concerned with who's abusing in their community, even though they all get drunk and abuse each other, and at a ridiculous rate. By the way, let me tell you, as a person who's run a few camps that have had these people on the block, the most abuse I've seen out of people are the ones who accuse others the most. They are abusing each other on a sexual, mental, or on a physiological level all day, and then they get out in the streets and they wag their finger at at the first white person they see, like, you're harming Black people by being white. They go at them like that, and so they're used there. But I started getting tired of all of that and compromising with those things to get the bag, essentially. And the people who, like, everyone started getting swept up in what the news and the media was telling them about the world. The COVID spin started, the bug started scaring people. That started, they started ramping it up and getting people on the V train. And when that started happening, people stopped caring as much about, why we were supposed to be out there. And so I was the only one kind of on an echo box yelling. And so I just started pointing towards just Black people and talking to just Black people and telling white people, I don't have nothing to say to you. This is just for my brothers, just for my sisters. And that's how they were able to isolate me by getting me angry enough to essentially break. And broke. Then they completely isolated me and started charging all of the leadership and left me out of the donations for the leadership. And, I slowly got pushed to the edges. I slowly started being the fringe to them.
Wow.
And so self-interest is the reason why they were able to get to me, because I wasn't able to stay on message, but more importantly, I wasn't able to, in that kind of environment, you can't actually get as much done as you think.
Right.
And that was a lesson I was learning, is that I was hitting the wall with the amount of support we could get. People were tired of coming out every day. People were tired of donating their stimulus checks or their unemployment checks to our organizations. They wanted to see something happen. And we needed more. We needed serious funds, and I was asking the wrong people.
And they came in and just stole your shit.
Yeah.
Sounds about right. I mean, right. These was white liberals, wasn't they? Socialists.
They were all anarchists and socialists.
Yeah, the socialists are, I study this, and this group, man, I tell you, this group of socialists, they don't live by any set of rules, bro.
No, they don't. They cancel each other out on a routine basis. Their leadership always is like a revolving door, and occasionally they go, we want a unilateral leadership. Everyone's in charge, and then all of a sudden it's not. It's always breaking down and rebuilding itself because of some new ideology or some book, some famous, I read Franz Fanon 8 times and now I know more. So let's change. Like, this is how they operate. They move from brain to brain to brain to move forward, which is another reason they're so relentless, because they have an endless supply of this, with propaganda, you can create an endless supply of brains to roll through to get to the top, which is what they're trying.
Well, socialism is not exempt from classes.
Yeah.
Socialism has classism as well. You know, the guy who gets to be Trotsky or the guy who gets to be Stalin or Lenin and actually start, leading the movement, it's going to get a lot of perks. And then the people under him are going to get a certain amount of perks, and then so on and so forth. I spoke to somebody from Russia who lived under Soviet Russia, and they straight up told me that, the only people that really had anything were people who worked for the government or had some sort of connections. She said, everybody else just lived really poor or meagerly, right? But she said, but the funny thing is, she said everybody was happy. And I was like, wow, they really mean it when they say you will own nothing and you will be happy. But I don't think it's.
Is it a real happiness?
It's a conformed happiness, right? It's for example, once you put these cell phones in front of people's faces, you go and social media and all of that. So if you don't have access to that, your happiness has kind of been kept intact somewhat. You know what I'm saying?
Domesticated horse or something like that. I'm sure that
I wouldn't go that far. I'm just saying that the things that are stimulating your brain are probably a lot healthier. There's nothing, because you got to remember this is Russia. So Soviet Russia, everybody's good at math and chess. So they're like science. So you're actually breeding a society of people that are actually really smart. But because everybody is going to college and everybody has a degree, so it's like, so everybody has to be equally poor, because like, who you gonna give the job to? The dude who got the A on the test or the dude who got the A on the test?
Almost like they're eliminating desire. Maybe.
Yeah. It's a little bit of that. I mean, you eliminate the possibility of dreaming.
Yeah.
For more, right? And the only way to get more is to probably join the government. So that's what people do. They join the army or.
I mean, if they're I think they're happy. I think obviously there's not a mass exodus of Russians.
Right.
So I would assume that this is how they live. This is cultural happiness.
It's like people who live in the jungle in South America.
Yeah.
Sometimes that simple life is happy. I think it's just different when somebody says you are going to live simple and you have no choice. That's a little bit different.
This is what they're asking here.
Right.
And that's not right. No. So they're a really powerful group. And I even tried to get, I saw how many people came out to their movements every time they threw a march.
These socialists.
These socialists. The main one, PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. In my mind, the Party for Socialism, because there's no liberation that is attached to that. But this is what they call themselves. They call themselves PSL. And I'm telling you, they didn't want to work with me. I spoke to their leaders on the ground, face to face. I had a habit of walking directly up to whoever was leading something and pinning them in the corner and saying, listen, this is not about our ideologies attacking each other. How can we work together, period?
Okay.
And so I tried to approach them several times. And each time it was, I'm not on message. I'm not talking about politics enough. Because the thing is that when you put us all in the same spot, people gravitate to the speaker they want to hear the most sometimes. And I was a lot better than some of the others because I was more personable. And so they saw, if we work with them, he's going to take the message. My message sounds even better than their message. My name drops will sound better because they're just talking about socialism. I'm talking about Black liberation, and that's provocative to people and sexy to people. Even if they don't care about it, they're out there for it. You know what I'm saying? They're like, ooh, Black power, like that. And
pull their phone out and shit.
Yes, exactly, 100%. And so they didn't want to work with us. And, at one point, they saw we were so effective, they would be like, all right, well, we'll pass our crowd off at nighttime. They'd be like, the guys at night, they do their own thing, they would whatever they can to separate but still be cordial.
Mm-hmm.
But they refused. We fought on the ground. Every time, they were doing something stupid, we would confront them, and they didn't like us confronting them because we would say in front of all these people, like in front of however big the crowd is that's within earshot, I'd be like, "Are you doing this for the narrative?" We would hit them hard, and they didn't like that because they're out there for socialism, and that you got to have a lot of sheep in order for that to really work. Whenever we were speaking, we were looking at individuals in the crowd. We used public speaking tactics. We looked right at the person, and we individualized each person that we spoke to. And that is completely different. They would get on their truck and, yell to the crowd, and say a bunch of platitudes about, putting some cops in jail, and then start preaching socialist aspects and using Black liberation as like a hinge point to throw it at people, to like a slingshot. And no one liked that. And so they fought relentlessly with us every time. They called us agitators countless times, even though we were the group who kicked out the agitators. They were agitators, what did one of their leaders in the news, see the news did a lot of highlights for them. And one of the times, Candace Bailey, one of their leaders, called us, rabid animals or ravenous animals or something. She said that we leech on to protest like rabid animals, and we cause destruction, and they printed this and put this in the news, man. And it was so public, which was crazy because all of the stuff we had done, all of the people we had interviewed with, and nothing we got was ever this public. Maybe a Facebook article that you could search for on your time.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And so, they were, it was a mixture of socialists, white liberal females, and the ops. They all are strangely really good bedfellows.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought? The most dangerous one out of them is socialist, because the socialist will kill itself. It will eat itself.
Yes.
It will eat itself. Anytime you come across any organism that will chew its arm off, you probably don't want to fight that animal. It's ready to die for anything. And socialists are ready to chew their arms off.
They are.
And it'll grow right back.
Which it did. It did. They shunned their leadership when it became too evident that their leadership was dangerous for the citizens showing up on the ground, right? And so shun the leadership, but then right simultaneously, we all got court cases put on us, and the leadership was back in action, getting, enough money for lawyers, the kind of money that we would have, needed in the very beginning to just secure a lawyer. And it was right back to work. And all of the voices who remembered all of the things that they hated him for, they kind of just slowly tapered off. What they would do is they would turn to the voice and be like, how dare you say that about these people? Instead of, how dare these leaders, when the leaders come back in action, they just, they cut off anybody who's still saying two legs back. That's essentially.
Absolutely.
And keep it rolling, and they keep it rolling. And when people tell you that this stuff is real, you don't believe it until you're there and you see it. Yeah. It's one thing to see it on social media,
right? But
when you see it happening, some of the things you would talk about, I would go out and I'd see them happening in real life,
right?
And it's surreal in real life because it's like a scary movie, like a movie where there's like a brain bug from another world, and it touches people, turns them into pod people, and every single person they touch, it's like that. They touch someone, and they're infected somehow with the ability to not think, but just think long enough to say, socialism is good, or maybe we need this, and it just infects an entire populace right in front of you.
Yeah, I can see the moles, the people that come in and infiltrate your protest. I've seen at least one of them during a live stream, like, oh wait, that guy looks like he doesn't belong. Who's that? Who's that? To just do that and then disappeared. You know, like you see stuff like that. But I interviewed Darren Sills, he told me firsthand, you know, when BLM touched the ground, and then when we see Antifa today, I'm like, oh, that's what they was doing back then. So there was like, it's the same groups. They rebrand and rename and they pop back out.
Yeah.
But the way socialism works, socialism is even funny, socialist groups, because if one group gets too powerful, they'll splinter and turn into two groups. So they multiply because they never want the one group to be too powerful and get out of control. Because what if they oust that leader? That's their ops, right? So
I've seen that happen.
You've seen what?
I've seen the multiplication of a group. In the midst of all of our actual work, we had created this thing. They created this thing called the GC, like a general, you know, a thing where everybody meets and talks. All the coalition leaders and whoever else wants to show up, they meet. It's a big giant round table, and it starts off as small groups. You know, we were all marching as 3 or 4 groups, and this general summit was created because there was all of a sudden like 20 some groups, 20 or 30 groups. And these groups were all comprised of people who were a part of the last group. And they just got in an argument with the leader because he's an abuser or because she misgendered them 3 times. And so they go off and they make a little mini group, an affinity group, and they bring that affinity group into the mix. And now that affinity group holds power, and all now you have all of these weak groups all cultivating some sort of power, and then they all work together to swing a vote. And then all of a sudden, they were all out there for Black Lives Matter and for Black people in general, and all of the Black leadership is on the other side of the table somehow. They all move onto one side of the table because those two things are not synonymous. The reason why our older leaders and their movements failed is because they adopted socialism, and that's why their movements failed. And when we refused to do that, and that's why we also failed, because they saw, oh, they're not compromising and they're getting a lot of power, a lot of movement behind them. But we have to take them out. We have to stop that because that's effective, and that's kind of what happened. People were like, what about the Rainbow Coalition? The Panthers did that. I was like, we're not doing that around here. I was like, we were putting our foot in the ground for some of these things. It wasn't about being just all Black people. It was about, there are some things we're not going to do. And
that's
we're
really
not
tough to manage, bro.
It is, man.
That's tough to manage for one guy. You would have needed a whole squad. You would have needed, I would say you would have needed at least six thorough ass niggas that was on the same page as you to manage all the infiltration and all the mixed messaging. You would have needed a preamble, a constitution, a bill of rights.
they took out the whole. We had a whole squad because I was just a voice. We had several people who all held a leadership position. They were all. They all grabbed a mic and did their thing specifically to deliver education. And so it was the voices they used to gather all of that, right? So an example would be, I'd show up and I'd be like, my brother PK right here, he's gonna take the mic and teach y'all something. You know what I mean? That is the kind of leadership we used, and they took out the whole squad. They essentially said, well, anything my wife says just comes out of my mouth. And so they started calling her the token. These are white people. These are white people in the middle of a Black liberation protest doing these things. And so they said, well, my wife is essentially my tail. And eventually all of the other leaders were my tail. They started calling other people me, other Black leaders me on their Reddit streams when we would all speak together. Well, one night, so I like to consider it a collection of minds, things that I would like to say, but I can't say it the way they say. And they would all go up and say these things. Well, one night a brother got up and he made a Mein Kampf reference to socialism. And on Reddit, they said, what's the deal with Trey and this other protest leader? And all the things that were said were me. They were labeling everybody, and 3 black men spoke that night. And it was all me. I was that one. And so that's what they did. They said anything that any of these people say is a product of this one person. I would, say, well, I'm not the only leader. We're all this, but it was always focused on who they saw as the voice.
So what about the other leaders, though?
They didn't mind. So we all started calling each other Trey. They all started saying, well, I'm Loud Trey, or I'm this Trey. They all in public as a running joke. They took it and I don't think maybe as a compliment, but they took it as, well, we're going to run with this then. If that's how it's going to be. And some of these people weren't even black. There was an Asian chick. She was one of our best homies there on the ground, one of our best voice boxes. Her opinion was my opinion whenever she spoke. And if they didn't call her me, it was her opinion.
They stayed loyal.
They stayed hyper loyal. And that was a good thing.
But were they politically, or I should say, no, I could say politically trained? Were they trained in the art of subversion and warfare?
No, the problem was
6 of them.
My brother PK, I love him, but he has some bad habits that he was running during that time, and he loved white women, and he loved he loved women. Let's just put it on. He loved women, and that got him into a lot of trouble. So they were able to separate him by getting us mad at him. A whole story that I don't even want to get into. It was unfortunate, but we're good now. Our other leader, his name was Red. He was he's what I called an everybody, because he didn't understand any messaging. And that wasn't bad, but he loved everybody. He wanted everybody to get along. But because he couldn't pin down something, he was very loose, and they were able to sway him, or sometimes he would just withdraw and not speak. He often would say, well, whatever Trey says, I agree with. Trey speaks for me is sometimes what he would say. And so he failed in this. He diverted his opinions and his voice to me rather than the leadership position. Other people who were a part of our group, we had a girl named Sky Morris. She's the granddaughter of Russell Means, who was one of the founders of the American Indian movement. A really big thing. She was on point for a long time, but she was surrounded by three people, two pronoun people, and one girl who had worked for Reddit, who was a Hispanic girl who yelled at any man for anything and was very feminist and very secular in her beliefs as far as what she wanted. She didn't care about anyone else. And they followed Sky around long enough that they were infecting Sky's ideology. So Sky was not as powerful a leader when we were talking to the people. When she spoke to her own people, we did protests in Pueblo, and she would speak to the indigenous community down there, and she was strong. When it came to the game we were all playing, her voice started to diminish because of the people that she surrounded herself with. And so I saw the mistakes that were causing all of our leadership to crumble. And the CI came in through one of the leadership groups, one of those groups, and put himself in a leadership position in that group, and groomed the people in that group, because he was an adult and they were kids. And so, yeah, so that's really how that, we had a strong group, but there were key things missing. They weren't all Hotep. My wife is Hotep, but anything she said, any Hotep thing she said was immediately my opinion. And there was just no getting around that. So, the others, they just weren't. I was trying to teach them. I was trying to grind it into them. I had my brother PK reading the ISIS papers to these white liberals, and they were just eating it up, which is crazy. And, and because this rhetoric, they love these all those fancy words, and Dr. Welsing, she uses so much terminology in there that they were just eating that up. They were just like, oh, this is, the white power structure, and it was, they were eating that up, but he wasn't soaking it up. So, he started to falter in so many ways, mainly in the way that the doctor told him not to, which is with women. And he fell really hard in that position. So, I could have done better.
It was nothing you could have done, sir. What was done is done, but you were put in a position, I would say, that I'm not even prepared for, right? Like, if I was in that mix, I'd probably be really low. Instead of out front leader, I'd be in the cut looking like, oh my God, it's a whole lot of weird shit going on. Because you got to remember, I did Occupy Wall Street. So I know what it's like to walk up and get a crowd. Because I used to just come and just drop my sermon and it'd be 30 people like, who's this?
Bang.
You know what I'm saying? And then I'm the god for that, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, hour discussion. You know what I'm saying? So I know what that's like to come to a gathering and you're the only charismatic dude there. And it's like people been sitting around chilling, ain't had much entertainment. So it's like you show up, you provide a little entertainment. It's like, oh, hey, what's this? You know what I'm saying? It's like a new attraction.
I lectured. I didn't chant. Every time I grabbed the mic, I was always lecturing people. I was always telling them what it is. And they liked that type of abuse. And when I wanted something nice to be said, I looked at the other leaders because I knew that they could say what I wanted to say in a nicer or in a more palatable way. And so I pass it off, and still they always funneled the hate to me, and they would give the love to the other leaders, or they would give the hate to the other leaders for following me. And that was, I feel like, another major way that we were able to be taken down in this.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense if they wanted to deride the organization. You got to take down the leader, right? But you weren't equipped for that, man. It's a lot that goes into planning, being in public with around a lot of people where you can't control who comes or goes. There's certain surveillance you need in place. If I were to organize something like that, the first thing I would organize is, what does our surveillance team look like?
We were already doing that. We had OPSEC.
Yeah.
We called it OPSEC. Yeah. We got radios, earpieces. We started as a security squad.
Right.
So that's why they took the outrageous measures to come at us, because they saw that from a physical infiltration standpoint, we were pretty solid. When people walked into the crowd who were obvious, we were calling it out. Sometimes we were following them and they would stop coming because they knew that we were on to them. We were hyper suspicious. And they saw that, okay, this is a group that can do some good. Each one of these people has a lot of charisma, and that was something that they were really scared of. They were like, we have to find another way around this. And so they went on campaigning, and that's why I say, these really good movements, these really good things that started, they can be taken down in any kind of way, whatever environment you're in, they are accustomed to being in that environment just for you. And
now imagine Jan 6.
That's right.
Imagine Jan 6 and just what happened with your organization. Imagine something massive like Jan 6. Totally unprepared.
Jan's and the thing about that, what makes that worse is that all happened on one day. Our protest down here was over the course of months, right? So these things built up. All of that stuff happened in one day. So you can't even create a atmosphere. You know, when people walked into any protest after several months of the ones in Colorado, they were getting stopped at the door. They were getting questioned. It was hard to infiltrate almost any group. Everyone was on their game, and the rhetoric, everyone spoke kind of the same. Everyone stayed on a message because they knew the danger, right? Gen 6, all the messages were out there. Anyone can hear. Everyone, the crowd just goes, you know, 5 people walk in this direction and yell, 100 people walk. You know, if I break a bottle, whoever's got a bottle near them, they're probably going to break it too. There's too much passion on the first day. There's so much energy.
If I had a time machine, what would you go back and change?
Don't make sure the wiretaps ain't actual planning, group planning, real group planning. See, what happened was that the ops, they planned, but the people, they didn't plan. They just said, you know, they looked at the Facebook post or they looked at the message or the message board and they just said, all right, let's go. No one had a real conversation. And leading up to that, no one discussed the message, the reason, you know, and you need several groups to be on one page. And if several groups make up, you know, a quarter of the mass of people, and those several groups are all on one page, that whole entire mass of people will start to follow that group. Because what they'll see several people in leadership positions followed by their entourage of minds, and they'll see, all right, they're all working together. Let's follow them. And that's how you infect an entire protest with good or bad ideology. And they didn't plan that. You know, the ops planned. They planned. They were like, we're gonna do this form of disruption. We're going to, you know, the people who are suited and ready to do things on camera, they planned. But people who showed up, the granny who showed up with her MAGA flag, she didn't plan, you know? Babbitt, she didn't plan. None of those people actually planned. And that's why that failed. If they were to actually have a reason that they were going down there instead of general American angst, because that's really what it was. It's just a lot of American angst, and there's no direction in there. And
well, I thought it was about the election.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what they was voting on, right? It was like that was the day they was voting.
But when you when you look at when you use the microscope on them, a lot of those groups weren't even talking about the election. They were talking about something else that the government's doing, and the reason why this is a good thing.
So just general anger at the Capitol. Yeah.
It was too much just general anger. If it was actually about one general message, you wouldn't have had people just climbing walls for random reasons. You know what I'm saying? Like, when there's no direction, people make a choice. They do things. They just do whatever. They almost become kids when they're surrounded by this many people who have loosened their inhibitions to such a high degree. They almost become like big children. And that's what you saw. You saw a bunch of big kids like, I'm climbing on the Capitol, all of this stuff. No one, you know, brought these people together and said, who are our minds? Who are our greatest minds in these groups that can articulate our demands the best? And those are integral. You need people who are ready to speak the demands, you know, even if you have a good message, even if your narrative is on point. If you don't have a list of demands that's cohesive to everyone's beliefs or what everyone wants, then nothing's actually going to get done. They're not going to listen to you. You can't hold anything or any space ransom. And that was the problem. They didn't have that right there. They just had 5 or 6 dudes who maybe wanted something and went in there with a political message. But 5 or 6 dudes is just 5 or 6 dudes at the end of the day, and 100 people going wild.
I got another question for you before we're going to start to land this plane. I got another question for you.
Sure.
If you can go back to any moment in Black history and change something, what would it be?
That's a question no one ever.
And for the chat, we're gonna get to super chats in just a moment. You got a question? You want to share some thoughts? go ahead, drop a super chat. I'm gonna get to y'all right after we answer this question. Good question, right?
That's a really good question.
I know what I would pick. I would tell King Monster Moose to keep his coins in his goddamn pocket, because you about to just destroy the entire economy of Egypt. Goddamn, what are you doing? Stop being a nigga.
How do I stop all of that from the jump? But you already said that, so I can't say that.
No, you can't use that. Sorry.
I would. I have like ultimate power to go back and change something.
You can go back like Back to the Future. You know what I'm saying? Where like, I'm Doc, I'm gonna drop you off. You gotta run in. You know what I mean? Do whatever it is you gotta do to change history.
Drop me off at the NOI meetings right after Elijah Muhammad passes away.
Okay.
Before that time, economically, they were a ridiculous force for the black population. And what was happening? And right after his passing, all of these ideas started coming up and diverting the nation into what we see now, which is not a bad thing, but obviously they didn't secure the bag like Elijah wanted, right? I would go in that time and I'd be like, listen, there's this person and that person and this person. They're going to come at you with some crazy ideas on how things need to be run. Trust them. Trust these three people right here. I'm not going to say their names, but trust these people. I'll say Khaled. Trust Khaled Muhammad, and trust these two people next to him, Malik Zulu Shabazz and this other individual, because they have a vision that is equitable for black people, and it right along with message. But if you don't, then what's going to happen is a lot of diversion, and that's what I do. I'd
so
probably
you're just gonna put it in this air. You're not clapping nobody, because you could just take them out, hop back in the DeLorean and come back.
But I think he would be martyred if I did that, or I'd never be forgiven.
Oh yeah.
I can't do that. I have to. I have. There's
That's true. It could be martyred, and you could create a whole nother space-time continuum, warp portal that fuck shit up a different way.
Yeah. Yes, but man, Mansa Musa, I would do that. I'd tell him, hey man, you don't have to go on that trip if you don't want to. You can see the world, but you don't got to see it like this, my dude.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Stay low key. Let's stay low key.
If you could warp to any moment in white history, what would you warp to and change?
Ooh-wee. I would warp to the time of Caesar.
Okay.
And I would ask. I would change the essentially the decimation of the Gallic people. I would change that moment, because I would be interested to see what shapes white history after that. Like, what actually happened? You know what I'm saying? I've always been interested in it. What if he didn't do that thing right there? That would have, that fast tracked him to being the Caesar that we all know and or despise, right? I would stop that moment.
But isn't that what made the Gallic tribes come together? And that eventually forms Germany?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. But because of that, there's not a lot of diversity in that area. You see what I'm saying? All those tribes were separated. And yes, it could have been a lot of war between them still, but the diversity of those groups would change. I feel like it would change the landscape. I think for all things, they just got too much in common, which is why they're so good at telling us to sit down. And I feel like if they didn't have as much in common, they would see how diverse this world is. It would change a lot of the ideologies that got a little crazier towards our time. I think that would stop that right there. And the language would be different. And the library would probably still be here, because Caesar would have not been in Egypt. He would have not been in these times. He probably still would have been there, or he probably still would have been there with a Gallic wife. You know what I'm saying? You never know. Probably not.
Powerful. I like that. Very intriguing, sir. Chad Lemoyne, thank you for the super chat, bro. He said, we just have to promote our own causes. F the noise. I don't want all the BS hype. That's the devil's game anyway, so seeking that is a trap. Indeed.
Right.
Jonah Ryan, thank you. He said, you can't get federal and state grants by creating success. That money is about creating recurring line items, stealing generational wealth. Oh my God. Chad Lemoyne said, Hotep Nation is the most perspicacious movement in existence, and these two gentlemen in this conversation embody that perfectly. Well, thank you there, Chadillac. See you soon, Chad. Canon Hotep, salute. Make sure you subscribe to Canon Hotep's channel for more great coverage of America and
I need to see Canon in the gym.
You need to see Canon what?
In the gym.
In the gym, he's a monster.
Yeah, I need to see him. I need to see some more check-ins with him.
Oh, some more check-ins?
Yeah.
He worked hard though, man. That boy, you know he run his dad business, and that's a 12 to 12 business. You know what I'm saying? Man. Yeah, he I don't know how he gonna get time in to hit the gym. Plus he got the kids. So we might try and get him on tape out in Vegas. Take him to the gym or something.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
You know what I'm saying? But yo, Trey, man, always a pleasure speaking with you, man. I miss you this year at HotepCon. Hopefully we see you there next year, man.
Yes, absolutely. Y'all have a blessed one.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been another wonderful, sharp conversation with yours truly, Bryan Sharpe, a.k.a. Hotep Jesus. And I'll see you soon. Hotep and Bill.
Hotep and Bill, man.